Truth Unveiled here, and today I have some important information to share with you. We're going to be talking about Rule 2.13 that was just legislated recently that has to do with New York, but we're also going to be talking about some more predictive programming in this video when it comes to the movie Leave the World Behind and Civil War, and we're briefly going to be touching up on the COP28 that occurred with the United Nations just a few weeks ago as we keep you aware, awake, and alert of the world around you. So we're here that says this, Rule 2.13, isolation and quarantine procedures. New York just did what? But basically it says the Appellate Division of the 4th Judicial Department reversed the Borrello, Lawler, Tague, Uniting NYS versus Hochul ruling. Senator George Borrello, Assemblyman Chris Tague, Assemblyman now Congressman Michael Lawler, and the citizens organization Uniting NYS had initially sued New York Governor Kathy and the New York State Department of Health over Rule 2.13 isolation and quarantine procedures. What does this mean? The state can now force anyone into quarantine for any reason that is not limited to the you know what. So basically they can quarantine you if, for example, they feel that or deem you sick, or if they deem you sick enough, or if they say, oh, well, you could be a threat or a domestic threat or a domestic you know what. Well, guess what? They can now quarantine you and take you away into quarantine camps. Haven't we talked about that on this network for how many years? Didn't we go over FM 3.39-40? Again, the Army's document about what? Quarantine and forced relocation in the event of a national emergency. Isn't that what your lovely president signed into office when it comes to these national emergencies and these executive orders? Haven't they been preparing for this stuff for years? And they're quietly enforcing these things state by state, region by region, legislation by legislation, while the world prepares and celebrates their holidays. Essentially, what has happened is that the government now has legal authority to remove residents from their homes and force them into quarantine camps. There is no age restriction. Children could be removed from their homes without parental consent. They do not need to warn citizens when they are coming or how long they must quarantine. You will be required to take any steps that the state mandates, including medications against your will. Oh, taking the you-know-what in case you already haven't? There is no due process, no court hearings, and no rule of law, as the government may now abduct citizens in the name of public health. And again, what was the test for it a couple of years ago with and through COVID? That was just the bigger test as they prepare for the bigger agenda. But now they're enforcing this legislation that tells you that they can do whatever it is at any given point in time. Here we are at the actual government website. Now, again, I'm not going to go over all of this for the sake of time, but I will link it in the description box below just so that you can have record and read it on your own time. Now, this tells you 10 CRR-NY 2.13. It tells you isolation and quarantine procedures. The very first one that is highlighted is A, duty to issue isolation and quarantine orders. Whenever appropriate to control the spread of a highly contagious communicable disease, the State Commissioner of Health may issue and or may direct the local health authority to issue isolation and or quarantine orders consistent with due process of law to all such persons as the State Commissioner of Health shall determine appropriate. Do you see what this is saying? Are you seeing this with both your eyes open? If they were to do or institute a COVID part 2 like they're doing with this variant JN.1 with the Omicron and all these other ones, if they were to institute another lockdown, they now have the legal right to quarantine you again. And not only could they quarantine you again, but they could what? Displace you into the quarantine camps and quarantine facilities and quarantine centers that they already have in place ready to go. Again, you can read the rest of this on your own time. I'm not going to for the sake of time, but I will link all the pertinent information for you. Now, this is the actual document, the PDF. It's 28 pages that comes from the investigation of communicable disease. It comes from the New York Health website, and it tells you what it says, that the regulations clarify the authority and duty of the New York State Department of Health and local health departments to protect the public in the event of an outbreak of a communicable disease through appropriate public health orders issued to persons diagnosed with or exposed to a communicable disease. And notice how they keep saying communicable. Why are they using this word choice and wording? Very interesting and suspicious indeed. Now, again, I will link this in the description box below just so that you can see what they're talking about. They give the definitions: contact, isolation, quarantine, and what they actually mean. So again, I will link this just so that you can see it on your own time and have the information available. It is a lot to go over. But again, what I also want to turn your attention to is section 2.13. Well, again, the section we just read in the isolation and quarantine procedures. You can also read them here as another witness as well for you, available at your own time. Now, don't forget, recently there was also this. There was the COP28, the nations where they met together to talk about climate change like they do every year, so-called climate change. And again, this is the United Nations Climate Change Conference, or COP. Now, it says that it took place in Dubai, the UAE. That took place last week, actually, or a couple of weeks ago, from the 30th of November until December 12th. Now, they claim that it's where the world comes together. Again, notice this comes together, new world order coming together to formulate their one world government, to agrees on ways to address the climate crisis, because it's such a crisis, such as limiting the worldwide temperature, the plane rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius, helping vulnerable communities adapt to these effects and achieving net zero emissions by 2050, according to them. But pay careful attention where it says vulnerable communities. Why do they need to help them? Why do these communities need their help? What is the issue here? Again, it's to get them involved in what? The beast system, to get their countries involved into the beast system, to what? Implement their new world order and their one world government, that simply put. So again, I will link this in the description box as well, because this is very important. Again, this is what the world is leading to. This is what the world is turning to. And it's important that you stay awake, alert, and aware to all of these things. Not only that, but speaking of that, just this past weekend alone or so, there was this that occurred with Comcast Xfinity data breach, affected over 35 million people. So what? Some type of vulnerability hack was exploited that leaked names, contact information, partial social security numbers, and birth dates. Why is this so important? Because on this network, we've talked about what? Internet outages and cyber outages. Why do you need to pay attention to that? Because that is leading into their one world government agenda when they prepare for the shutdown, to shut down the power, to shut down electricity, to shut down everything. It's preparing for the world shutdown. So when they shut it all down, that if they were to open it back up, everyone is dependent upon this beast technology. Everyone is dependent upon the AI technology. Again, you will need it to be able to what? Buy and sell potentially. You will be able to need such technology to be able to move around and navigate around. Without technology, you cannot go anywhere. But again, they have to do what? The phoenix rising out of the ashes. They have to get rid of the old one in order to implement the new one, and they have to time it perfectly and do all of these tests beforehand, hence the COVID test as well. It's just interesting because something like this, they even showed you and depicted the exact same thing in one of the movies that was released recently called Leave the World Behind. There's no going back to normal. Leave the world behind. This is literally Yahweh telling you to what? Come out of her, my people. Come out of the world. Come out of the world and be ye separated or made apart. Do not be like the world. Do not partake in the world and her plagues and punishments. This is what Yahweh is trying to subliminally tell you, and is using the elite to even tell you the exact same thing. They're putting the truth right in front of you. So now the part 2 of this video, we're going to go over some of the predictive programming in this movie, because I've actually taken a look at the film. I've actually seen the film, so there will be spoiler alerts. I recommend, if you already have not, you can definitely try to watch the movie on Netflix or anywhere else on your own time so that you can see the predictive programming. And again, folks, they're putting the truth right in front of you, because in the movie, what is the main thing that happens? A blackout or some type of EMP. Again, and they also tell you about the frequency warfare, again, the psychological warfare on people when again there is no power, there is no electricity. And what are the odds that barely a week after this movie comes out that Comcast has this supposed breach and this supposed hack that affects over 35 million people? Because as you're going to see in the screenshots that we've taken from the movie and the film itself, it tells you that there is a power outage that affects the entire east coast of the USA. That's at least 35 million people. Wow, very interesting and suspicious indeed, putting the truth right in front of you. Now, please pardon me in advance. I'm probably not going in order of the way that these pictures were depicted in the movie, but what I've done is I've taken the liberty to actually watch the movie and screenshot certain parts of the movie. For copyright purposes, I cannot play the clip of the movie, so I had to take screenshots instead. So this is what you're actually seeing from screenshots of Netflix of the movie. Now, in this particular scene, this is towards the end of the movie. What do they show and depict? They show and depict bombs going off on the East Coast, what appears to be New York or New York City, bombs going off, fires being started. Again, what? Civil war, civil unrest. And in this video later on, we're going to be talking about another movie that shows predictive programming called Civil War. And when you see what day it's coming out on and how it could coincide with an appointed time, just like the eclipse, everything is starting to add up indeed. But I found this scene to be very interesting and suspicious indeed, that it shows what? Bombs going off and everything that's occurring. Again, it was something that looks straight out of the end time. Now, this is interesting because in the beginning of the movie, they show you that right after the blackout occurs. So basically, for those of you who don't know, that this movie is based on the book, and within the storyline, there's this family, and this family contains Julia Roberts and a few others. What they do is they decide to take a getaway, a weekend getaway. Now, notice how all this occurs during the weekend, so that's important to pay attention to. But they take a weekend getaway outside of the city, but when they do, there is this blackout that occurs that affects the city. They still have power where they are in the place that they stay. However, the entire city, there is a blackout and there's chaos. And part of what happens is the ships no longer work. So the ships are no longer en route and the ships start to dock in random places. It's interesting that one of the ships is called White Lion. Oh, lion, like lion of the tribe of Yehuda or Judah. What are they really hinting at here? Could they be hinting at judgment? And also, it reminds me of that verse in scripture that talks about the ships of the Rashayash or the ships of Tarshish. And when it comes to the second Exodus to come in the book of Yashayahu, Isaiah, what are they really hinting at? What do they really know? Also, in the movie itself, there was also a national alert about a national emergency warning effective immediately. Emergency broadcast system issued an unrecognized emergency warning. Now, again, we've talked about this on this network, and we pointed to all of the EAS or the emergency alert system tests that would occur via FEMA and when they would occur. And interestingly enough, they occur when? Around the fall time, just in time for the fall appointed times. Wow, definitely not a coincidence either. And again, this movie also depicts and shows and foreshadows what? Bunkers and underground bunkers. What are they really hinting at? The end times. Now, it's just interesting, this part, when Julia Roberts checks the phone in the movie, this is what shows up. So it shows up with different news reports where it shows blackout reported on the East Coast of the United States. East Coast of the United States reports power failure, breaking, hackers behind power outage. And again, didn't we just see something about that with that Comcast report with hackers? Didn't we just see something about that? Very interesting and suspicious indeed. Again, folks, it all ties together. They're preparing and conditioning the public to be ready for these things when they occur. Now, in the movie, this was something I found very interesting and suspicious indeed. When the so-called dad character is driving the car, is trying to seek help and trying to go back to see if they can learn more about what has occurred and what has happened. Because again, you have to remember, in the movie, they basically go to a vacation home that's in the middle of nowhere. So when they get into the car, this is what they see. The radio station talks about environmental collapse, but it shows what? 16 2019. Isn't that interesting? Because that is the supposed Gregorian year that so-called African Americans arrived to America for the first time. Why is that so important? Because does it have to tie into the 400-year prophecy that was spoken of in Brashith, Genesis 15:13 through 14, and Acts chapter 7 verses 6 through 7? And next year just so happens to be the second eclipse. X marks the spot with the Great American Eclipse, and it makes the X, or the Tav, through with the numerical value of 400. Very interesting and suspicious indeed. That's definitely not a surprise or a coincidence whatsoever. And then there was also this scene too, where again the family is together and they try to get back into the city to get more help. But what they soon start to realize is that what the city is blocked off, and what the movie is actually showing is that these Tesla cars that are self-drivable, that meaning they can drive themselves, they drive themselves and collide one by one into each other. Again, blocking people off entry so that people are not able to leave the cities come chaos, locking people in the grid lockdown, the grid shutdown. Why would they show that and depict that? I just thought it was interesting because again, it's all staged, it's all planned and plotted ahead of time. There's nothing random about this whatsoever, but in the movie, another scene that I found very interesting is this one right here. Now, of course, they show from the perspective of the supposed moon landings, but was there really a moon landing, or are we on a plane? That's for you to decide. Why am I showing you this picture though? What is this really depicting and hinting at? Oh, that's right, the eclipse that will be occurring in barely 4 months from now, next year. Wow, what perfect, impeccable timing. And again, they show the eclipse, and again, what are they alluding to? And just like we talked about in our recent video with the Economist cover, what the eclipse, again, it's very important that you're seeing this symbolism with both your eyes open. Towards the very end of the movie, one of the characters, I think it's the youngest character, wants to actually see the last episode of Friends. And again, what is the title of that? The Last One? Interesting. But then it shows in the movie that this person escapes to the bunker and finds a bunker, and they find the emergency alert system. And at the very end of the movie, they show this, which I find interesting. White House and major cities under attack by rogue armed forces. Now, what the interesting part is what? The date right here, September 17th or 9/17, emergency alert. I just find that interesting. Why, you may be wondering? Because on our calendar for the appointed times for next year, for 2024, what's on September 17th? Oh, that's right, the first day of trumpets. Wow, that is definitely not a surprise or a coincidence. And again, the fall appointed times have yet to be fulfilled. The spring ones have already been fulfilled by Yahusha during his death, burial, and resurrection. And then also with harvest, with the Ruach HaKadosh being instituted, and also the law being reinstituted unto our people. And you can read Acts chapter 2 to read more about that. But there are also the fall appointed times, trumpets, atonement, and tabernacles. These ones still have to be fulfilled, folks. So the fact that they would even allude to that and show that, I just found that to be very interesting, pointing to next year. But it doesn't stop there. That's only the beginning. There's also this movie too, Civil War. Wow, and it comes out next year. Wow, what perfect timing. Civil War, huh? What are they alluding to? Because it says here in the premise, a family traveling across the U.S. struggles to survive during a near future civil war where the government becomes a dystopian dictatorship and partisan extremist militias regularly commit political violence. Haven't we been talking about this on this network for how many years, this exact thing? And they show you the poster for it, spring 2024, Civil War, around the time of the eclipse. Huh, interesting. And what date is this going to be coming out? That's right, April 26, 2024, or 4/26. How could that relate to the appointed times? Oh, that's right, on the 26th day of the 4th month in our calendar. Again, that's not the same as April 26th, but it's just interesting. On 4/26 in our calendar, that's the same day as what? Harvest, or the Harvest Festival? Could they be alluding to something when it comes to the Harvest Festival? Didn't Yahusha in his word talk about the Harvest Festival and make prophecies regarding the Harvest Festival when it comes to the wheat and tares, to leave them until time for the harvest? Huh, very interesting and suspicious indeed. Could these movies be depicting something that could occur around this time, around the spring and fall of 2024, maybe even before that when it comes to the eclipse? Could they be alluding to something? Could they be foreshadowing foreshadowing something that will occur next year? Could chaos and all potential hell break loose and stuff really start hitting the fan next year, especially with that eclipse and X marks the spot and all the prophetic significance, just as we've talked about? Could they implement and institute all of those things when it comes to the required quarantines and isolations and all of that? Could that be instituted just like what happened with the you know what? Could it all be administered? Are they all planning for all of these things? That's for you to decide. Or are these just movies? That's for you to decide. But as you're deciding, please seek Yahuwah and his true son Yahusha for even more truth. This is Truth Unveiled here saying, as always, Shalom.